Hey everybody, this is Perch. We got the announcement that next year, videos aren't that far behind. Well, maybe they will be. I don't know. Maybe you're hearing this in December. In which case, happy Hanukkah, everyone. Right? Why not? Anyway, we got the announcement that in 2023, so next year, that Marvel's got 6 events teed up for the first half of the year. And if you're counting at home, that's basically one a month. Now it's a little bit of cheating. One of those events starts, I think, in November, late November, but then it crosses into January. So you basically will have 3 events that will run in some form or fashion, either starting or ending in the first 6 months of the year. 6 events, 6 months, which is pretty crazy if you come to think about it. But it is an admission or an indication of where the business is at right now, which is, events spark sales. So therefore, let's do events. We want sales. And then there's something kind of more, a little bit more nuanced than that as well. It is sales, certainly, but it's also something else. And the something else is it is an indication of kind of where, in particular, Marvel's head's at, which is long form storytelling in the comics doesn't make sense anymore for their model. And what does is, is kind of like Netflix, basically little, events that come out that are somewhat encapsulated that they believe they can throw into a trade or what have you. And they don't really they need to have continuity, but they don't really need to have continuity. I mean, one of the things about events is there. You never notice and DC's doing it right now with Dark Crisis. There will be comics that they've got all these notes all over them. Go, the events of this comic take place before the Dark Crisis. They're having to kind of really juggle when things are taking place, when these events and these stories are all kind of coming together. And they're having to do that because the events themselves are just they come up with a big concept idea and they just run with it, and then they worry about how it fits into whatever's going on in the comics later. That's something that the comics have evolved to, but it creates a patchwork kind of problem. And I think it gets a lot worse, of course, when you've got multiple events stacked on top of each other. If you think about where the X-Men sit at this moment, somebody brought up this example to me, and it's a little scary if you think about it. They said the X-Men only have their action, only have their battles, only have their kind of big, moments like that, moments that kind of used to be the driver behind the superhero comic. Those only exist in events for the X-Men. The regular comics are filler. So basically, the monthly comics are the baseball game, nothing but the baseball game, and long, drawn out, decompressed arcs. And the when things happen are Ten of Swords, sort of, are Inferno, are the X-Men getting involved in Empire, or King in Black, or this Fall of the Mutants that's coming up, or the Dark Chasm, or not Dark Chasm, the Spider-Man event that's coming up. So anyway, that the actual action only takes place in events, and the month-by-month comic is basically the in-between, which, considering there's, like a dozen monthly comics, that's pretty nuts. Now, not a completely fair comparison. If you click over to X-Force, for example, Beast is doing something, and they're kind of, but even the plot, and Ben Percy, I think, is one of the more liked writers in this current X. He's certainly one of the higher selling ones. If you read that comic, it is, if you really take a step back, nothing is happening. We've got we've got Beast doing stuff, and Sage is kind of suspicious of him, maybe, and Wolverine's got a adamantium shield, adamantium surfboard, and Deadpool's sometime hangs out like that. Anyway, it's remarkable how little is actually going on. But it kind of ties into this question. The question is, to Perch, we all know event frequency is getting ridiculous, but what about the tie-ins? Why does every event need so many tie-ins, especially when oftentimes some of the tie-ins don't even matter to the event plot? Do they really squeeze that much more money out of an event? The answer is no, typically. There's not a lot of extra money, and if you look at the sales, and it didn't used to be this way, but it has been this way for a while. that the sales of comics, the events, tie-ins, the extra little limited series, the things they do, sell terribly. In kind of the one that I really paid attention to because we had a little bit better numbers back then, the War of the Realms event. A lot of the tie-ins were selling sub 20,000. It's questionable if some of them made money. And unlike some of the other comics, you can say, well, there's an aftermarket for some of this stuff. There's, they can do a trade. They can, throw at least the ongoing monthly comic that's selling low, into a trade or sell it another place. There's really nowhere you can sell. And Marvel used to try, and they don't even do that as much anymore. They used to sell some of these tie-ins as kind of the supporting trade, but the event itself is not strong enough to warrant that. So where does all this come from? Well, tie-ins used to be quite popular. And the idea was, the story of the event is so big and so earth-shattering that we can actually add more comics to it because it will flesh out the story more, and people can't get enough. And that has been going on for years, but it really kind of, I think, hit its peak with Civil War. And Civil War had the very unique branding on the front. If you remember, like half the cover was just a color, and they had the logo there for Civil War. And those tie-ins sold amazingly well. Whether they were limited series or they were, crossing over into a monthly book, many of those tie-ins sold better than the regular monthly title. We saw sales like the Miss Marvel book at the time had a spike in sales that was significant, like 20,000 extra units sold. It lifted everything. And ever since that point, again, the comic company's been doing that long before Civil War. But Civil War was really like cash in. And so you saw an increase. You definitely saw an ramp up after that point. We rolled into Secret Invasion, and then you had, what did you have? You had the Dark Reign stuff, and then you had the one where, there was a short one where they went to Asgard, Norman, and that was kind of the end of Dark Reign. But then they, anyway, there's been tons of events, and they do tons of tie-ins. And what's kind of happened is the tie-ins no longer sell anywhere close to as good. From what I've heard, many comic shops didn't bother ordering the tie-ins for Empire, and the sales, at least we got kind of half-baked sales at that point. We're not getting accurate numbers, but anecdotally, what I had gotten from Marvel was that a couple of them were selling. There was a couple sold below 12,000, which is just terrible. But what it indicates is the fans aren't buying that way. They're not interested in the connections, and the story isn't strong enough that can lift everything else up. That's just the problem. So where what do you do with all that? The right thing for publishers to do is to start backing away from some of the event tie-ins in order to get the interest back up that they can sell them. So definitely it'd be good to have a strong event, but it would also be good if the tie-ins actually mattered to the story, meaning they weren't completely auxiliary side quest stories. Make them main. Another, and this is a crazy idea, I know, but why don't you make your tie-ins $1 or $2 cheaper than the main event? And make them the core book. Do your $4.99, $5.99 for your core book. That is also too expensive, but do that, and then have your tie-ins. Do a special thing as Marvel to have your tie-ins be $1.99, $2.99. The tie-ins do not have your A-list writers or art team on it. You're always putting kind of new faces and new names on those. So and maybe that cheaper price will create people to have a bigger interest in the event. Of like, well, I can get in and read this side quest story, but it's relatively cheap to do so, and that's exciting. Try it. I mean, quite bluntly, the comic shops are going to get there anyway. Those things are all destined for the quarter bin if they were ordered in the first place. So you might as well meet them halfway. But anyway, this is one of those things where once upon a time was very successful, then it's not. Comic industry keeps doing it somewhat because they kind of hope it will be successful again, and also because they've shifted their business model around to where they kind of need that money. Even though it's low, they now have built a monthly kind of revenue chart. That's way too formal to what they do. But anyway, they built a structure that now if they stopped doing those, it would create a hole because they wouldn't know what to replace it with. So anyway, I'm not a fan of a lot of the tie-ins. I would be if they mattered, but I was not a big fan of them when they were in Civil War and selling great. I was always a big fan of just have the event be the event. But anyway, that's the answer as I have it. What do you all think? Do you read event tie-ins? Do you buy them? Do you go all in as a collector? Do you need everything that has to do with the event? There's certainly some of those people out there. When was the last time you had an event where you went to your comic shop and said, "I want everything attached to that"? Because once upon a time, that used to be how things happened. They did that with, definitely with Civil War, definitely with, Secret Invasion. That did happen. The AVX, I remember people coming into my shop going, anything that carries this logo, anything connected, or Marvel would put the little checklist out there. It's like, just give me all of it. I'm signing up for all. That's, anyway, that's where we're at. Thanks for listening.